Hello, it's day 73, part 2 of the Liberator project, and I'm glad you could come back because we're going to do the next stage of making some borscht. And I do enjoy cooking. I feel very happy and I'm quite enjoying it, but probably reasons for that. I said the wine would get better after the first bottle. Okay, since you've been gone, I simmered the pot for a bit over 4 hours actually, until it was convenient. So this pot had the meat and the salt and the water in it, simmered for 4 and a bit hours, and then all I've done is I sieved the entire contents of the pan. This is my sieve, into another pot. I then washed out this pot, clean it out, make sure it was perfectly clean, and then this is the liquid that was in the. You see that? The liquid that was in there has been sieved, and that's just liquid and a few little bits in it, but mainly it's liquid, so that's fine. And all the meat and stuff is now in here. Right, now the next stage, which is probably the worst stage of the whole thing, is you've got to separate the meat, the beef that's on those bones, from all the other crap that's hanging around with them, all the fat and the bones and the mesenteries and stuff and gristle. You don't want that in your borscht. You just want it to have the beef, the beef stock and the meat itself. You want to get rid of a lot of things. Now, when the thing's really cooked, if you see here, I mean, it literally, the bones, it just falls off the bone. You see that? The bones just come out. I'll try and do this one-handed. But yeah, bones just lift out of that. And then using some forks and a knife, what you do is you separate the fat and the gristle and everything on one side, and the beef, you'll clean that up a bit. So you try and get as much of the decent meat as possible. You separate the two into two different piles. Now, that takes a fair bit of time, but you haven't got to be too precious about it. I mean, a little bit of fat won't harm you, and if you lose a bit of beef, it's not, you haven't got to be that precise. You've just got to basically do it. And depending on your tastes and how choosy you are, is how long you want to spend on that, and make a good job of it. Right, so I'm now going to spend probably 10 minutes or so sorting out the beef and the bones, and I'll end up with a pile of beef. I'll end up with everything else that gets thrown away at this point, and of course the dogs used to love all the gristle and stuff, but hedgehogs not so keen on it. And then once I've got the beef, I put it back into the pot here to sit. Now you need to let that sit for a while, and what happens is when it cools, all the fat, which is actually the beef dripping, will rise to the top, and then the beef stock and the beef itself will be at the bottom. You want to skim the dripping off the top and save that for later. You don't want that in your, I mean, you want some of it in your borscht, but not a great deal because it's really fatty. Tastes good, but you don't want a greasy borscht. Oh, it's the last thing you want. So I've got to leave that for an hour or so to let that calm down and settle. I mean, ideally you put it somewhere cold and let it really set out so that the dripping actually forms a solid layer across the top. But it's all right. I leave it for an hour, then I can skim it off and sort it out. And so I'll be back in an hour with that. Once that's done, we can actually go on to the last stage of making the borscht. So that's great. There was one thing I was quite sad about today, was the fact that, now this is usually something that's good, but today, because I wanted to show you it, isn't. I wanted to actually show you how to get the froth off the top of the meat, off the top of the pan. But this boiled and it was really nice. There was no frothy top to it at all. It was beautifully clear, so I didn't need to do this and skim that off. But it's usual like that. I mean, if you use other meats in there rather than just these beef bones, sometimes if you're using, I don't know, liver or kidney, you get a bit of a film on the top and you've got to clean that off. But luckily today, or unluckily today, as I wanted to show you it, but today that wasn't a problem, so that's not That's not an issue. So I'll be back in about an hour once I've sorted out the beef, once I've let that settle, and then back in about an hour's time to join me for the final part of making the borscht. By the way, once it's made, it actually tastes best, you know, after a day or so. So, you know, although it's finished, you've got to let it sit for a while. But I'll come on to that later, about an hour's time. And the only sad thing is that I'm actually running out of wine, and the only drink I've got left is Vermouth, which is a crying shame, because that's terrible. But, you know, you've got to, I said, you know, it's all about improvising when you're cooking, so you have to, you know, make the best of what you've got. Okay, I'll see you in about an hour. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.